Hey everybody, welcome to day 2 of the Leek's first ever set review week. Today we're going to be reviewing Blue. I'm not going to go over all the intro that I did yesterday. If you want to know everything about how this set review will work, you can review the Wednesday set review if you've jumped into this one for some reason. I'll do a quick rehash of my disclaimers. Number one, I have not played with these cards. These are my first glance impressions. These are how I'm going to be dealing with these cards next week and the week after. Over time, these ratings will, of course, change as I get actual experience with these cards. Disclaimer number 2. What was disclaimer number 2? Disclaimer number 2 was this is a limited set review only. I'm not talking about constructed. I'm not talking about standard, modern, legacy, commander, etc. I may make passing reference to them, but my grades, my discussion, everything is about draft and sealed. If I disparage a card that you think is going to be awesome in standard or is going to break open legacy, don't worry. It's just about limited that I'm talking about. I'm a primarily limited channel. And disclaimer number 3, these are of course just my opinions, the way that I'm viewing these cards. If you disagree, that's awesome. I'm doing this just simply to help people see how I look at the cards and to encourage them to think about the cards for themselves as well. Maybe you'll see something that you didn't think of when I talk about it. Maybe you'll see something that I didn't think of when I talk about it. This is just to encourage discussion. But without further delay, we're going to jump into the cards. First up, we have Aven Surveyor. So this is a creature bird scout at common for 3 blue. So it's a bird, so it probably flies, and it does. It flies. It's a flying 2/2 for 5. So obviously there must be something else to this. Well, it says, when Aven Surveyor enters the battlefield, choose one. So this is part of the cycle that we saw yesterday with Sandstep Outcast. And just like Sandstep Outcast and like everything in the cycle, the first choice is to put a +1/+1 counter on it. So it's a 2/2 flyer for 5, or it's a 3/3 flyer for 5. Your choice. If you don't want a 3/3 flyer for 5, you want it to be a 2/2, you can instead choose to return target creature to its owner's hand. Your creature, your opponent's creature, whatever creature you want. So it's a Mist Raven of sorts that's sometimes bigger but sometimes lacks the Mist Raven ability. I'm a big fan of bouncing creatures. Bouncing creatures is a huge tempo play. I often love playing tempo in limited. I've started to become a much bigger aggro fan lately, but I do have a very soft spot for tempo. Now, Mist Raven was a 2 blue 2/2 flyer that bounced a creature. So you pay an extra mana on this just to have the choice of whether or not you want to do it. Now, unlike instant speed bounce, this won't save things from removal. This is just a regular creature. There's no flash on it. So you are just going to be doing a tempo play, probably planning on getting through with creatures that are on the battlefield on your side. So you're going to bounce one of their blockers just to get some extra damage through. Maybe you'll be messing around with some end of the battlefield effects or something and bouncing one of your creatures. Maybe you'll be bouncing off some a Singing Bell Strike or something. But probably not. You're most likely going to want to be using this to bounce one of their creatures. So a 3/3 flyer for 5 is a little bit expensive. You're obviously paying for the choice here, but it's still okay. It's still perfectly fine to have. You know, in this set we have 1 extra mana for a 4/4 flyer in all of the dragons. 3/3 flyer for 1 less, that's not that bad. This will probably make the cut just for those stats alone. The bounce makes it even a little bit higher. Now, of course, I like Mist Raven more than this. I like the guaranteed bounce and being a little bit cheaper, but this is still okay. I'm going to go with C+. The plus definitely comes from the bounce. I just love bounce. I love tempo plays, and I'm glad to see more of them coming into this. This is something that, you know, you're not going to take it that highly. You're going to take this late in pack 1 when you're kind of sure you're going to go blue. The double blue, of course, means you probably want to be heavily blue, but you're probably not going to cut this. You know, it doesn't battle with the dragons in the air, but it battles with pretty much anything else that you'll see in the air. So yeah, I'm pretty okay with this. C+. Not amazing, but definitely not nearly as bad as some other cards we've seen. Next up is Cloudform. Cloudform is another cycle. It's along with Lightform that we saw yesterday, and it's the same kind of thing. It's an enchantment, and it's 1 blue, just like Lightform was 1 white, and it's uncommon, of course. So these, if you remember them from yesterday, are enchantments that when they enter the battlefield become an aura. So Cloudform says, when Cloudform enters the battlefield, it becomes an aura with enchant creature. Manifest the top card of your library and attach Cloudform to it. Enchanted creature has flying and hexproof. So the one that we saw yesterday was flying and lifelink. This is flying and hexproof. So yesterday we gave Lightform a B-, and Cloudform is going to be pretty much along the same lines. So it's everything that I talked about yesterday where, Manifest, I'm hesitant on it. I'm probably too cautious on it. It's probably going to be pretty okay. And making a flying hexproof guy is pretty decent. I like it a little bit less than the lifelinker. Hexproof is interesting. It's a mechanic that I hate. I hate playing against it. I don't think it's fun, and they've definitely lessened it in years, in current years. They know that it's an unfun mechanic. Hexproof is super useful and super scary on Sagu Mauler because Sagu Mauler is a 6/6, and it's a morph too, so it just comes out of nowhere as a 6/6 hexproof. A 2/2 flying hexproof, that's not as big of a deal. So as long as this just stays as a manifest, the hexproof isn't that special. You just have a 2/2. I'd honestly prefer the lifelink. Yeah, it can get killed by a lot of things, but I'm going to gain some life out of that over several turns, whereas this is just going to be a 2/2 in the air that can't be targeted by what will probably be the smallish amount of removal that your opponent has. Keep in mind, most decks are going to be running, 6 or 7 non-creature spells, and it's going to be pretty rare for all of those to be removal spells. So I'd prefer the lifelink. Just also for the fact that if you do have a creature underneath that manifest token that you have on the battlefield, a much bigger flying lifelinker seems to me to be much better than a much bigger flying hexproof guy. Both of them are pretty okay, but I do think I give the slight edge to the lifelink, the light form. So we gave Lightform a B-. I'm going to give Cloudform a B- as well. I'm not going to quite knock it down to C+ territory, but it's close just because I do prefer the lifelink over the hexproof. I'll take it relatively highly. I'll probably take it, 4th-ish pick or so. There's going to be a lot of rares that'll pick over this, maybe some commons that'll pick over this, but I'm pretty okay with this. As well, it also really depends on how playable the enchantment hate becomes. Suddenly, Erase looks a lot better, Naturalize looks a lot better with all these auras that are kicking around. But yeah, we'll give this a B-, just like Lightform, but I guess a B-, ever so slightly less than Lightform. Alright, so next up we have Enhanced Awareness. Enhanced Awareness is a 5-mana instant. It is 4 and a blue at common, and it says draw 3 cards, then discard a card. So it is Jace's Ingenuity plus looting, kind of. And it is discard a card from your hand, so it's not discard a card of those 3 that you drew. So that is pretty decent as well. Now the downside, of course, is that this is pretty expensive, 5 mana. Divination is often playable at 3 mana to draw 2 cards. Paying an extra 2 mana just to get an extra card plus looting, which could be a benefit, could be a disadvantage depending on the stage of the game, what deck you're playing, etc. But overall, I think this really has a place in specific decks. It really needs to be in sort of a very grindy, tempo-y, late-game Sultai deck, I think. It's not obviously going to go into aggro. It's not going to be anything like that. And you probably don't want this to be your curve topper either. Not only that, the 5 spot is often reserved for a number of other things, including your on-morph spells. So I like the ability of this card. I love drawing cards. Card advantage is huge, but it's a little bit too expensive. So I'm going to give it a C-. But in the deck that wants it, it's definitely going to be a lot better. Basically like Jace's Ingenuity was. Jace's Ingenuity Didn't go in every blue deck you ever played, but the ones that it did go in were pretty darn good. Same with Opportunity back in M14. Opportunity was huge in M14 draft when you played the specific blue tempo-y late game deck. So yeah, be careful with this card. Make sure that you are the deck that wants this. If you're not, cut this very, very, very liberally. So yeah, I'm going to give that a C-. Next up, we have another card advantage-ish spell called Fascination. It's X blue blue for an uncommon sorcery, and it's another choice card. It says choose one. Each player draws X cards, or each player puts the top X cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard. This is an F. This is an awful, 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 awful card. Card advantage is awesome. Giving your opponent the exact same amount of card advantage except you were the one that had to pay for it, that's awful. I don't ever want to do that. Ever, ever, ever. The mill side, milling is not how you win Magic unless it's a very tuned, constructed, probably casual mill deck. Limited, definitely not going to look for the mill win here. And not only that, but it's a symmetrical mill effect. You're milling yourself the exact same amount that you're milling your opponent. Now, maybe you're the Delve deck. Maybe you're the Sultai Delve deck and you want a lot of cards in your graveyard. But keep in mind that Delve is the Sultai mechanic, but every single clan has access to Delve spells. Temur has access to blue and green. Jeskai has access to blue. Abzan has access to blue and black, or sorry, not blue and black, green and black. And what's the other clan? Mardu. Mardu has access to black. Every single opponent you face, regardless of what they're playing, may be playing Delve spells. And so you're going to be helping them out probably just as much as you're helping yourself out. Just not worth it at all. Don't take this card. Don't play this card. It is arguably the worst card of the set, I think. It's the card that I never want to see in my uncommon slot, knowing some of the uncommons that could have been there. So yeah, solid, solid, solid F on this card. Next up, we have Frostwalker. Frostwalker is a creature elemental for 1 and a blue at uncommon, and it's a 4/1. A 4/1 for 2. We've seen 3/1s for 2, and they've been pretty good. A 4/1 for 2 sounds awesome. It does have some text, and that text is a drawback, unfortunately. It has the unofficial illusion ability, or disadvantage, if you will. It says, when Frostwalker becomes the target of a spell or ability, sacrifice it. So if your opponent taps this guy, you know, if they have a tapper and they tap him, if they hit him with a crippling chill, if they do anything to him, he dies. If you do anything to him, he dies. So don't get caught trying to put an aura on this guy. You can bolster him, which is interesting, because bolster doesn't target. Bolster just looks at who's the lowest power, or who's the lowest toughness, and this guy probably will be, and then he'll get counters. So bolster won't kill this guy. So that could be something, but most other things will kill this guy just by looking at it the wrong way. That being said, a 4/1 for 2 is huge. I will almost always play a 3/1 for 2. A 4/1 for 2, I'll probably play as well. Your 3/1s for 2 often die pretty quickly. They'll get in on turn 3 for some damage most of the time. They might get in on turn 4 for damage most of the time. By turn 5, they're probably trading with something, or your opponent is just pinging it and killing it somehow. Same thing's going to happen with Frostwalker, except it's going to be 1 extra point of damage each turn because it's a 4/1, not a 3/1. So I'm pretty high on this card. I'm actually going to give it a B-. I don't think the illusion drawback is that important. I can't think of too many targetable abilities that are commonly available. There's of course a bunch of rares that have targeted abilities on them, but I can't think of too many common abilities that'll just destroy this guy just by looking at him. And in the right deck, this could be huge if you can build an aggro-y deck. I've actually kind of seen a lot of blue cards, and we'll talk about this later, that I think help blue out. Blue looked like it could have been an aggressive deck in cons with things like Jeskai Wind Scout, but it just never really quite got there as being too aggressive. But a number of cards in this set I think help it out, and I think this is a key card for helping out blue as being an aggressive deck. So if you're an aggressive deck, this guy is huge. So yeah, B- for sure. Don't be too concerned about that illusion ability. I don't think it's going to get easily removed all that often. I think your opponent is going to use a removal spell on it, which, you know, even if it didn't have the illusion ability, it probably still would have died. So yeah, I'm going to take this guy relatively highly. I'm going to play this guy in almost every deck of blue that I'm playing, especially if I'm going a little bit more aggressive. All right, next up we have our first blue rare, Jeskai Infiltrator. 2 and a blue for a creature human monk at rare for a 2/3. So Jeskai Infiltrator has a whole lot of text on him. It says Jeskai Infiltrator can't be blocked as long as you control no other creatures. So if you only have him, he's unblockable. Unblockable's pretty good. We've seen just how good it can be with Mystic of the Hidden Way. Mystic of the Hidden Way can just destroy you if it flips on turn 4. I have seen games where, you know, just nothing can be done, and that 3 damage a turn is just huge. Now, of course, with Mystic of the Hidden Way, you typically have backup to block. With Jeskai Infiltrator, if you have backup, he's no longer unblockable, but he has more text. When Jeskai Infiltrator deals combat damage to a player, which it will if it's unblockable, exile it. End the top card of your library in a face-down pile. Shuffle that pile. So you take Jeskai Infiltrator face down, you take the top card of your library, whatever it may be, and you shuffle those 2 cards a whole bunch, and then you manifest them. So Jeskai Infiltrator becomes a manifested 2/2, and whatever was on top of your library becomes a manifested 2/2. So you get 2 2/2s after this guy attacks. One of them is going to be this guy again. So your opponent knows what one of them is, but they don't know which one it is because you've shuffled them up. And you get whatever happened to be on the top card of your library. Could be a creature that might flip, could be a land, could be anything. This guy sounds pretty interesting. I definitely like the 2/3 unblockable for 3. You know, you want this to be your turn 3 play, you want this to be your first creature that you played, and you want to be getting in on turn 4 with this guy. So on turn 4, you're going to have 2 2/2s. One of which is this guy. I'm pretty happy with that. Getting the free manifest out of him sounds really nice as well. I'm cautious about manifest, but if I can get manifest for free, I'll take it. And, you know, it's going to cause a lot of crisis on your opponent's side with them holding a removal spell and trying to figure out which one of those is the Infiltrator and which one is maybe just a land or maybe just garbage. It's going to cause a whole lot of thought on your opponent's side. So, yeah, I like this guy. I'm going to give him a B. I'm going to take him pretty highly, and I think he'll be fun to play. I don't know if he's going to be bomby, but I think he's going to be pretty fun, and I'm looking forward to playing him. Next up, we have Jeskai Runemark. We're back to the cycles. We've looked at Abzan Runemark yesterday, and this is almost exactly the same. Enchantment Aura for 2 and a blue this time. At common, enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets +2/+2. That's all the same as Abzan Runemark. Just replace blue for white, of course. Enchanted creature has flying as long as you control a red or white permanent. So Abzan Runemark gave us vigilance, and I wasn't a big fan of that. This one gives us flying if we have one of the Jeskai color permanents down, red or white. Remember, lands are colorless. They're not colored. I like flying more than I like vigilance for sure. Obviously, this is conditional flying. You have to have a red or white permanent down in order for this to be more than just +2/+2. But if you're in Jeskai, that's probably going to be down there most of the time. This has the usual, you know, 2-for-1 potential that all auras have. So, you know, this isn't going to be crazy high, but it's all right. I can see myself running this in most Jeskai decks that I run, especially if blue isn't my main color, especially if I'm main red or main white. I can see myself playing this. I can also see myself cutting it. You know, if I just have a lot of good creatures, I'll put in a good creature over this any day. So this is kind of just a solid C-. It's a card that I'll take when it comes back around. I'm probably not going to take this in the top 8 cards. This will probably be in the pack that I open, and I'll get it back. But I'll put it in my deck for the time being, and then see if there's anything else that I'll cut for it, and I'll readily cut if need be. So it's higher than the Abzan rune mark. Abzan got a D because I just don't care about vigilance that much on an enchantment, but flying is much better. Throwing flying on a big guy, pretty great. Throwing a flying on anything that triggers when it damages your opponent, pretty great as well. So I'm happy with this as far as auras go anyways. So yeah, C-, and just keep in mind all of those typical aura disadvantages, the potential for the 2-for-1, and make sure that you do temper your evaluation of auras with that in mind. Next up, we have Jeskai Sage, which is another creature human monk. Monk, like Soldier, is a tribe that is huge in Cons and Fate Reforged, but has no actual support. Warriors, of course, got massive support for being warriors, and these monks and soldiers just get to, show up and be friends with each other, but don't actually help each other out. So anyways, it's a 1 and a blue for a 1/1 at common. So we talked about 1/1s for 1 yesterday, and there are 2 1/1s for 1, at least, that I do like in this set. But they have very specific reasons that I like them. A 1/1 for 2 sounds even worse, so he's got to have some text on him, and he does. He says prowess, so the old Jeskai prowess mechanic. And he says when Jeskai Sage dies, draw a card. So he replaces himself when he dies. This is perfectly fine. It gets outclassed almost immediately as a 2-drop. Most 2-drops are going to be 2/2s, so they destroy a 1/1. Your morphs, of course, are going to demolish this guy. I talked a lot about prowess yesterday. I'm going to obviously see more of it today with blue. Just to remind everybody, I don't like prowess. I think to make prowess strong, you have to make your deck weak in limited, because you need creatures in limited. Boy, do you ever need creatures. And every non-creature spell you put in your deck is one less creature that you have to get damage through to win the game. So I don't like prowess. I don't consider prowess to be that much of a benefit on a card. Jeskai Student, for example, I find terrible, the vast majority of the time. And so I don't find prowess to help this guy very much. The fact that sometimes he may be a 2/2 doesn't change this for me. I don't want a conditional bear. I want a bear. So the prowess doesn't do anything for me. The card replacement is nice. The fact that when it dies, and it will die, it'll die quickly, you get your card back, that's pretty okay. So I'm going to give this guy a C. I'm going to cut him pretty regularly, just like most other prowess guys. But I do like that the card replacement. This guy is obviously much better with bolster, so if you are full-on Jeskai and you have the blue and the white, that helps out as well. But, he's perfectly cuttable. There's a lot of other 2-drops that I'd probably prefer over him. Next up, we have Lotus Path Djinn. This is a creature Djinn monk for 3 and a blue at common, and it's 2/3. It has flying, and it has prowess, and that's all for rules text. So we have a flying prowess 2/3 for 4. This also seems perfectly fine. Alabaster Kieran was a 2/3 for 4. It had vigilance instead of prowess. I'm pretty fine taking either of those, I think. This blocks, a number of things. It blocks your opponent's morphs pretty perfectly. The prowess, again, doesn't really boost things for me all that much, just because I found prowess to be really, really underwhelming in limited. So I'm fine with this. It doesn't block the dragons when they eventually come down, but I'm perfectly fine with this. I give it a C+, same as I would give Alabaster Kieran. Cuttable, but not as bad as some other cuttable cards. You'll take this, again, relatively late in the pack, but you'll be happy to have it in your 23, most likely. Next up, we have Marang, or Marang, or something, River Prowler. He is a creature human rogue for 2 and a blue at uncommon. And this is the cycle with, I can't remember which card it was, Wandering Champion. Yeah, Wandering Champion. from yesterday. So he's going to care about permanence. So first up, it says Meringue River Brawler can't Prowler. Sorry, not Brawler. Prowler can't block and can't be blocked. So we've talked about can't block, but we haven't talked about can't be blocked yet. But it says something else. It says when you you may cast Meringue River Prowler from the graveyard as long as you control a black or green permanent. So if you are Sultai or half Sultai, probably meaning your Abzan, if this guy has died or been milled away or been discarded or somehow found his way to your graveyard, as long as you have a black or green permanent on the battlefield, you can recast him from the graveyard. That's pretty cool. I was originally kind of down on this guy because of the can't block mechanic. The fact that he can't be blocked is awesome. A 2-1 that can't be blocked, great, perfect, love it. A 2-1 that can't block, I'm not as big a fan of that. And I originally wasn't quite a big a fan because blue was so not aggressive in my experience in cons. But I have seen enough cards, Frostwalker definitely started to turn this guy around for me, that I do think blue aggro can be a thing in Fate Reforged. And this guy will then end up being a pretty big player in it. I still don't like the can't be blocked aspect of it. If you're behind in any way, shape, or form, this guy does nothing for you. You would rather have any other creature possible other than this guy. But other than that situation, I do like him. So, you know, if I'm playing control, I don't think I'll take this guy. He could be a finisher, a very slow finisher in a control deck, but I think I'd probably prefer something just bigger that's going to get through. But in a blue aggro deck, if it does exist, if this and Frostwalker and etc. Really make blue aggro a thing, I can see this guy being pretty good. And so I'm going to give him a C+. Cuttable in certain decks, playable in most other decks. Not quite bomby enough, but I think he could be good. And of course, he loses a lot if you happen to be playing... sorry, I guess Teamer also takes this guy. But yeah, he loses a lot if you don't have black or green permanents. And, you know, there could be the doomsday situation where this guy's in your graveyard and you have a handful of blue spells, or blue creatures and no black or green permanents, and then you just, you're unhappy about everything, I guess. So yeah, C+. I've gone up on him. I originally had him in D territory because I really disliked him, but he's gone up. We'll see if he goes up even more. This will probably be the card that has the biggest potential to just incredibly surprise me. But we'll see. For now, I'm going with a C+. Next up, we have our next uncommon dragon. Just like the white one, he is 4 blue for Mind Scour Dragon, for a creature dragon at uncommon, and a 4/4, just like the white one. Has flying, of course, most dragons do, and his ability says whenever Mind Scour Dragon deals combat damage to an opponent, target player, so your opponent or you, puts the top 4 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard, so it mills 4. This, I don't like. I don't like it at all. I'm already kind of down on the dragon cycle just for being 6 mana, 2 colored mana, 4/4 flyers. That's really expensive. That requires dedication to that color. You may just not have the lands, the 2 lands of that color. So I'm already down on them for that. And a dragon that mills, that's awful. That's just awful, especially in this format with Delve. Remember, every single clan has access to Delve. It's not just Sultai. If you're the Sultai deck, you know, you can mill yourself for sure and maybe get a little bit of value out of this. But in general, you don't want to be milling your opponent in this format. So this drops down even further for me. These dragons could surprise me, maybe, but I'm putting this at a C-. I put Word Scale Dragon at a C. It was slightly better, just to sort of remove those combat tricks. I find the mill rule on this just garbage. It may as well not have it as far as I'm concerned. But of course, it's not a May ability, so you do have to do it. So yeah, C-. These dragons, they're not terribly impressing me. I'll have to see how they play, but I'm just I'm not a big fan of 6 mana 2 color flyers. Next up, we have Mistfire Adept. This guy is interesting. It's 3 and a blue for a creature human monk at uncommon, and he's a 3/3. So a 3/3 for 4. Totally okay. You know, that's often what you'll pay for a 3/3. 3/3s for 3 are fantastic, of course. This guy has prowess, and he has a little bit more. If he just had prowess, you probably wouldn't have heard me saying this guy is interesting. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, so whenever this guy gets prowess, basically, just like Seeker of the Way, target creature gains flying until end of turn. Now this I like as a build-around card. If you take this guy first pick or second pick, you can try to go the prowess route. And I'll probably try it at least one more time, even though I've been so underwhelmed by prowess. Because if you have this guy out and a few other guys, and you cast a couple of non-creature spells in one turn, if you cast, you know, a Crippling Chill and a Force Away, 2 of your creatures now have flying, plus this guy's a 5/5. That's potentially going to finish the game. You know, that's going to be a lot of damage coming through in the air. So I do like this guy as a build around me card. That being said, this has the same prowess drawback that I find, that to make prowess strong, you have to make your deck weak. You have to cut creatures to add in more non-creature spells. And typically, those non-creature spells want to target creatures of your own. So I'm hesitant about this guy, but I am going to give him B-, just because I do like that build-around possibility. If prowess continues to be underwhelming, this guy's going to drop. If prowess suddenly amazes me, this guy will probably still just stay where he is, because I don't think prowess can get so amazing that this guy's going to be any better than what I think he could be. So yeah, B-. I will probably take this guy relatively highly and try that at least once, and figure out if I was correct on this rating when I try that. But I'm interested to play this guy and see just how good that potentially multi-flying creatures in a turn can be. Next up, we have another cycle card, Monastery Siege. We talked about Citadel Siege yesterday. I loved Citadel Siege, by the way. This is an enchantment for 2 and a blue at rare, so it has a different casting cost. The other one was 2 and 2 white. But it has the same rules text. As Monastery Siege enters the battlefield, choose cons or dragons. Cons: at the beginning of your draw step, draw an additional card, then discard a card. So when you draw, or when you get to your draw step, you get to loot for free every turn. Now, I'll talk about this, but it's not may. You must loot. So keep that in mind. Dragons: spells your opponent casts that target you or a permanent you control cost 2 or more to cast. So it's the Frost Giant ability. So if your opponent's going to throw a removal spell to a creature of yours, they're going to need to pay 2 extra, or else it gets countered. So this is interesting. In a tempo deck, the Dragon's Choice could be good, just to kind of slow down your opponent's removal spells. But remember, Limited is a creature format. If you're playing completely to blank removal, you're just going to get run over by creatures. So the Dragon's Choice almost seems a little bit more constructed. The Con's Choice seems really good. Looting is good. Looting every single turn is probably going to be pretty great. And looting in addition to drawing a card, so it's not going to be like, you know, you draw your card and you have to loot it away. You are going to get choices out of this. The interesting thing I pointed out is that if you play this on turn 3 and you kept 7 hands, that means you have 15 turns before you mill yourself, because it's not a May ability. Now, 15 turns is an awful lot, and if you're looting every single turn, you should be able to close out the game. So that's not a big downside. That being said, I'm sure someone somewhere is going to mill themselves out because they played this on turn 3 and they can't close the game out. So make sure you have bombs. Make sure you have a win condition in your deck, or else you will just deck yourself. But that being said, looting every turn is fantastic. I give this a B-. Not quite as high as Citadel Siege. Citadel Siege, I think, is just oppressive. Those 2 counters every turn are huge. Looting every turn is great. It's not quite as impactful as the 2 counters every single turn. So yeah, B minus. I will maybe first pick this, but I'd probably prefer to take it, you know, third-ish pick, fourth-ish pick. I'd probably prefer something a little bit stronger than this, maybe removal, maybe a really awesome creature. But this seems okay. I'm probably going to take the Khan's ability over the Dragon's ability as well, the vast majority of the time in Limited, I think. But yeah, just a quick warning. Keep in mind that if you get stalled out, that looting thing may mill you out. It's rare. You should be able to close the game, but just keep that in mind. All right, next up is Neutralizing Blast. Neutralizing Blast is an instant for 1 and a blue at uncommon, and it says counter target multicolored spell. So this is just a counter spell, and it's unconditional. Well, it's an unconditional conditional counter spell, so there's no unless your opponent pays clause, but it does only hit multicolored spells. And there's not a lot of multicolored spells in Fate Reforged. There were, of course, many more in Khans of Tarkir. Khans is still going to be 2 packs that you're drafting with only 1 pack of Fate, so this is still going to hit a lot of things, but it is definitely a sideboard-only card. You're not going to want to main deck this because maybe your opponent only has, you know, a couple of gold cards and you don't really care about them. So this is going to be something where you're playing and on turn 5 they drop Zurgo. And you're going to say, oh, well, I can't deal with that, so game 2, I'm going to put a Neutralizing Blast to counter Zurgo or counter some important gold card they have. Never main deck this. Never, ever main deck this. Only side it in if you see something that really needs it. A comparison of this would be Disdainful Stroke. Disdainful Stroke I would consider mainboarding just because there are so many things with converted mana cost 4 or greater that I want to hit. Gold, on the other hand, not quite as ubiquitous as CMC 4 or more. So this is a solid D. This is, you know, don't take it highly. Don't put it in your main deck. But when you're going to use this and when you need to use this, it does what it needs to do. So, you know, it's kind of the definition of a D. All right, next up we have Rakshasa's Disdain. This is another instant for 2 and a blue at common. And Rakshasa's Disdain says counter target spell. It's another counter spell. Counter target spell unless its controller pays 1 for each card in your graveyard. Now this is one heck of a conditional counter spell. You are going to have relatively little control over you know, how your opponent or how much mana your opponent's going to have to pay for this. At first I read this and I was like, wow, this seems awesome. My graveyard always has cards in it. But your graveyard doesn't necessarily always have cards in it. And on turn, you know, turn 4, turn 5, if your opponent's curving out, you're probably going to have a couple of cards in your library. This will be an expensive mana leak. It'll be more than 2. You know, if you're a Delve deck, maybe this gets a little bit bigger, but you're going to be removing those cards to Delve, and they're not going to be sitting in your graveyard. So yeah, the conditional aspect of this just seems way too high variance for me. So, you know, this gets a D-. I'm going to actually knock it below Neutralizing Blast even. Again, this is a sideboard card at best, but I don't even think I would sideboard it in just because of how high variance it would be. Counters often have kind of a tough life in Limited, and if they're conditional or not quite awesome, they have an even tougher life. So I'm going to give this a D-. Next up, we have Reality Shift. This is another instant for 1 and a blue at uncommon, and it says exile target creature. Its controller manifests the top card of his or her library. So this is probably going to be removal most of the time, which I love. Blue does not get removal most of the time. It gets, you know, it gets bounce. 1 and a blue, return the creature to your opponent's hand, and you're going to see it next turn. 1 and a blue, get that creature out of here forever. That sounds pretty good. Now, your opponent will get a 2/2 manifest back. So, you know, that 2/2 could be important. And if it's something good, you know, if it's a good creature, you could have just hurt yourself there unless the creature that you got rid of was even worse than that. So it's interesting. It's another high variance card. Fate Reforged really seems to be upping the variance, which I'm nervous about. You know, people who know me know that I'm often pretty critical of Hearthstone because of the variance that's involved in that game. There are so many cards that say random this, random that. And the randomness of Fate Reforged does make me hesitate a little bit. That being said, this is unconditional removal for blue, and I really like that. So I'm going to give this a B minus, but you know, it has that variance. There's going to be those times where you cast this and you think, aha, I got rid of that creature that was annoying me, and then they flip an even better creature. And that's going to suck. But as long as you use this on their best creature, you know, they're never going to get anything better, so that's decent. Still, first pickable, I think. If your rare's not good, I would probably take this, but I think that variance could cause a blowout against you, unfortunately. Quick side note, you can, of course, use this to exile your own creature. If your own creature is going to get arrow stormed or kill shotted or killed in some way, you can kill them yourself and get a 2/2 out of it. So that does get a little bit more utility out of this spell. Obviously not the way you're probably going to want to use it. You're probably just going to want to kill one of theirs. Alright, next up we have Refocus, which is an instant for 1 and a blue at common, and it says untap target creature, draw a card. So it's kind of the reverse of what we saw yesterday with Pressure Point, which was tap target creature, draw a card. This seems, you know, it seems pretty okay. It's a combat trick is probably the way you're going to use it. You're probably not going to untap your opponent's creature. You're probably going to untap yours as a surprise blocker. Your opponent came in and didn't quite think about it. Not only that, it does combo with prowess. You know, your 2/2 suddenly untaps, becomes a 3/3, blocks and kills their morph. There are some fun things that you could do with this, and it replaces itself. Cards that replace themselves for cheap are awesome. So I'm pretty okay with this. I give it a C+. It's not a card that I'm super looking forward to. It's the same thing as Pressure Point. I'm not excited by this card. I will cut it if I have a better non-creature spell or a better creature to go into this place, but it's probably going to make most of my decks. The C+ just kind of shows that I'm not excited about it. It's kind of like Awaken the Bear. You know, it's a card that will usually make the cut, and it will usually do an okay job of what it needs to do when it does it, but I'm not looking to take it highly. I'm looking to take it pretty late. I'm looking to take it probably as the last playable blue card in the pack when I know I'm going to go blue, or I think I'm going to go blue. So yeah, it's okay. That's the best I can say about this card. And, you know, that's the best you can say about most cycling cards, cards that cycle themselves, is that they're okay. You know, the fact that it cycles it is what really kind of ramps up the playability of it, and it being so cheap is pretty nice as well. So yeah, just a solid, straight-up C+. All right, next up we have an interesting one. Renowned Weaponsmith is a creature human artificer for 1 and a blue at uncommon, and he's a 1/3. So 1/3 for 1 and a blue. That's a pretty standard power toughness for that cost. And it has a ton of rules text. First paragraph says, tap, add 2 to your mana pool, so that's 2 colorless. Spend this mana only to cast artifact spells or activate abilities of artifacts. We haven't gotten to the artifact set review. That's going to be on Friday. But there's not that much that you're really going to be looking to use this for. Please note, somebody's going to try this somewhere. Ugin is not an artifact. He's colorless. But all colorless cards are not artifacts. So keep that in mind. You're not going to be using this guy to ramp into Ugin. Second paragraph says, pay a blue, end tap. Search your library for a card named Heart Piercer Bow or Vial of Dragonfire. Reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. Heart Piercer Bow, of course, came from Khans of Tarkir. It was an equipment that you could throw onto a creature, and when it attacked, it would ping. It was nothing special. It didn't really do much. I never played it. Vial of Dragonfire, we don't know what that does. That is a card that is going to be in Dragons of Tarkir. So we have a card that this creature cares about that we don't even have yet. We're going to see it in a few months when Dragons comes out and Fate Reforged switches from being drafted with Khans to being drafted with Dragons of Tarkir. So who knows? Vial of Dragonfire could be amazing, and this card could be amazing then, but it's not amazing now. It's pretty bad now, actually. Heartpiercer Bow just is not good. I would never play it, and I would never play this guy just to get it out on command. Maybe Vial of Dragonfire will be awesome. If it is, this guy might go up a little bit as a fun little combo, but otherwise this guy just seems bad. As I said, there's not that many artifacts that are really important. None that I would be, desperately looking to ramp out either. Nothing in Khans of Tarkir either, so this guy seems constructed. Is the intent of what he was designed for with that first ability. The second ability appears to be the draft ability, and it's a bad draft ability. So this guy just is a solid F. This is another uncommon, just like Fascination, that I don't want to open. I'm going to open it, and I'm going to go, ugh. There could have been anything else. Well, I guess there could have been a Fascination. There could have been a lot of other things in that uncommon slot, but I got stuck with this. So F, I'm never going to take this. I'm going to take it last pick. I'm never going to play it. Maybe if I, again, I talked about this before, if I screwed up my draft somehow and I'm seriously lacking on creatures, I'll throw in this 1/3 for 2 because that's all he's going to be. I'm not going to be throwing in him plus Heartpiercer Bow. Maybe this guy could go up when Dragons of Tarkir comes out if Vial of Dragonfire happens to be absolutely amazing and a card that you're desperately wanting to get into your hand, but I doubt it will be. So anyways, F, pass this guy. Don't pick him. When you get him, rip him up. Next up, we have Rite of Undoing, which is another instant for 4 and a blue at uncommon. And it has Delve, so hopefully this guy's going to be cheaper than 4 and a blue. It says return target non-land permanent you control and target non-land permanent you don't control to their owner's hands. So you have to bounce something of your own, and you get to bounce something of theirs. Delve helps this out a lot because 4 and a blue is way too much to pay for this ability. But Delve helps this out a little bit. And it can bounce some fun things. It could bounce their Planeswalker if you need to buy some time off that Planeswalker. Could bounce their suspension field or something. Keep in mind, of course, bouncing those things instead of removing them is weaker because they're going to come back next turn for sure. If you have a lot of enter the battlefield effects, the bounce your target creature side goes up in value a little bit. You could return a manifested card that you really want, a non-creature card. So I think this is okay. I'm curious to see how it plays out because it really reminds me of Set Adrift. Set Adrift was basically Griptide. Put target creature on top of their owner's library for a very expensive casting cost with Delve. I can't remember the exact casting cost, but it certainly wasn't 3 and a blue like Griptide was. This is Peel from Reality, which I believe was 1 and a blue. And so being 4 and a blue is pretty expensive in comparison. Now you do get the slight bonus of being able to hit a permanent, so you can hit an aura, you can hit a planeswalker, you can hit an enchantment. But it remains to be seen. This could go the same way as Griptide, where it just happens to be too expensive too often. Or it could be fairly decent. So I'm going to go kind of middle of the road here. I'm going to go with a C. I'm probably going to take this card and give it a go because I do love tempo. But we'll see if the expensive cost with Delve makes this as good as Peel from Reality was. And Peel from Reality was fairly decent. As I've talked about yesterday, and as I'll talk about when we get to green, if I can put together a bunch of good Enter the Battlefield effects, this might go up a little bit. If there is an Enter the Battlefield effect bounce deck, it could be kind of fun. I definitely want to try that, and we'll get to the card that's definitely going to make me want to try that when we get to green. But yeah, this is just going to be a C for the time being. It could be good, or it could utterly fail, like Set Adrift has. But we'll see. We'll have to give it a go. Next up is Sage Eye Avengers. This is Creature Djinn Monk for 4 double blue, so 4 blue, so 6 mana, at rare for a 4/5. And it says Prowess. Whenever Sage Eye Avengers attacks, you may return target creature to its owner's hand if its power is less than Sage Eye Avengers' power. So if you attack and nothing's happened, you haven't cast anything, you can bounce before blockers any creature that your opponent has, or sorry, any creature that anyone has, because it is a target creature, to their hand if its power is less than 4. So you can bounce any 3, 2, 1, or 0 power creatures. That seems pretty powerful. If you happen to have triggered the prowess before you attack, which kind of sucks, because you're not going to be using combat tricks on this. You're going to be, if you are, you're going to be very, very clearly telegraphing, and not only telegraphing, just flat out casting your combat trick before combat. But you could use some other non-combat tricks like Force Away, or even just cast a Planeswalker and then attack with this guy. He'll be bigger. He'll be a 5/6, and you'll get to bounce maybe something a little bit better. This seems relatively powerful to me. I definitely like tempo. I like bouncing, as I've said. The fact that a quick little spell like a Force Away, a Crippling Chill, a Refocus, a Pressure Point, something could make this guy even bigger, big enough to bounce almost anything in the set, makes this guy, I think, pretty good. He is relatively expensive. 4 double blue is quite a lot. We're looking at the dragon territory here that I have been kind of down on, but I think the ability here is pretty huge. So I'm actually going to put this guy at an A-. I will first pick it. At least early on, the 4 blue could come back and hurt. It could just be that this is too expensive, too hard to cast. But I am putting him at an A- and probably jamming this into sort of a control tempo-ish deck. That way I can put this guy down on ideally turn 6. Hopefully I've been kind of controlling their board a little bit. Maybe I have a Monastery Flock, something kind of holding back. And then I can start just doing things like Crippling Chill to tap down a guy, attack with this guy, and bounce their 4 or 5 power creature. And get in for, ideally, 4 or 5, or 5 damage. And then, you know, Force Awaying and all these little cheap spells to do it. Again, with Prowess, this has the same sort of downside as I found, that to have that many non-creature spells, you're going to have not many creatures. But this guy does kind of work in the control deck. You know, I wouldn't be throwing a whole bunch of Jeskai Wind Scouts. I wouldn't be throwing a whole bunch of, what are the other guys that we have here from this set? Jeskai Sages in my control deck. But I'd throw this guy in a control deck, in a tempo deck, for sure. Absolutely for sure. So yeah, I'm going to go A- on this guy. That might be high. I'll be first picking this guy if I see him, and we'll find out then if maybe this rating should be a little bit lower. But I'm pretty high on this guy for the time being. All right, next up we have Shifting Loyalties. Shifting Loyalties is a sorcery for 5 and a blue at uncommon, and it says exchange control of 2 target permanents that share a card type. So you're not going to be trading an island for a Sorin or anything like that. You have to trade a creature for a creature, an artifact for an artifact, a planeswalker for a planeswalker, an enchantment for an enchantment, or a land for a land. This sounds awesome. This is what makes people, especially new players to Magic, read these cards and immediately think, oh man, I'm going to trade my 1/1 for their 10/10. I'm going to trade my terrible card for their awesome card. And that might happen sometimes, rarely. The majority of the time, this card's going to suck. This card's going to be bad. This is just like Switcheroo. Switcheroo was in M15, I believe. Maybe it was M14. It's never anywhere near as good as you think it's going to be. You always think about those awesome, awesome opportunities, and they never quite get there. Daring Thief, I think, was the card from Born of the Gods, I believe. Yeah, I think it was in Born, where when it untapped, you got to do this. And that was better because it was repeatable. You just kept getting to do it. Spending 6 mana and an entire card on doing this one time is not going to be good. There's going to be a million situations where this card is dead. You know, you have a really good creature and they just kind of have middle of the road creatures. You're not going to want to trade. You don't have a creature, they have a good creature. You don't want to trade. You want this to be anything but this card. There are so many situations where this card's going to be dead. So I don't advise ever really playing this card, because there will be those pretty fun situations now and then where you get the blowout. I won't give it an F, but I will give it a D-, and I will say that you probably shouldn't play this card. Maybe I'll feature this in a Wacky Wednesday or something, but this is one of these things that you do want to stay away from. If you play this card and you blow out a game with an amazing trade, don't just remember that game. Remember every other game you played in that tournament where this card didn't do anything, where it was a dead card, where you lost because this card was in your hand and it wasn't something else, and it wasn't a 2/2 for 2, and it wasn't anything. Those times are probably going to outnumber the awesome times by far. So yeah, D-, just barely out of F range, but I could probably throw it into F range if need be. Be careful about these cards. Don't let your best case scenario mentality get the best of you. All right, next up we have another cycle card, Shu Yun, the Silent Tempest. He's a legendary creature human monk for 2 and a blue at rare. He's part of the Ancestral Con cycle. He's a 3/2 for 3, and he has prowess, and he has a hybrid mana ability like Dagatar that we looked at yesterday. His says whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you may pay Boros, so red or white, red or white. So you could pay red, 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 white, or white, white. If you do, target creature gains double strike until end of turn. That sounds pretty good. First off, this guy's a 3/2 for 3 with prowess, which is fine. I've talked about prowess more than enough. I'm not going to rehash that. 3/2 with minor upside for 3 seems fine. The ability seems pretty decent. But you are going to have to be careful. You're going to need to build your deck. You're going to need to have those non-creature spells that are cheap. You're going to need to be using Refocus. You're going to need to be using Pressure Point. You're not going to be using, you're not going to be using, what was it called? Enhanced Awareness to trigger this. Because Enhanced Awareness plus this would be 4, 5, it would be 7 mana to do that. And that's probably going to be more than you have most games. So be very careful with that. As well, I'm sure somebody will ask this at some point, but this is not repeatable. So you can't pay red, red for this creature to get double strike and red, red for that creature to get double strike off the same spell. You do only get to do this to 1 creature per spell that you've cast, so don't get too excited about that. But yeah, if you're playing, really low spells, especially spells that draw you more cards or replace themselves, I could see this being pretty good. Seems like an auto include in any Jeskai deck that you're playing, any Teamer deck that you're playing. I would put this in for sure. I would take it pretty highly, and I would build, a tempo deck. I would build maybe a control deck that's going to have a higher than average number of non-creature spells. In just flat out aggro, if it exists in blue, which I'm thinking could happen, I don't think this guy's quite as good, because you're not going to want to be casting instants and sorceries. You're going to want to be casting creatures and more creatures, and then maybe a Trumpet Blast. So yeah, I rate this guy pretty highly. He's a B+. I'll be taking him first pick if I see him, and going Jeskai or maybe what's the other clan? Teamer. There we go. Yeah, so I like him. Auto include. I don't think I'd ever cut him if I had him. Maybe if I was Sultai, I would cut him because he wouldn't do anything in Sultai. But yeah, I like him. Pick him highly and see how fun he is. All right, next up we have Sultai Skullkeeper. Sultai Skullkeeper is a 1 and a blue for a creature Naga Shaman at common for a 2/1. So a 2/1 for 2. Not as good as a 2/2 for 2. Not as good as a 3/1 for 2, but is okay-ish. But it has rules text. It says, when Sultai Skullkeeper enters the battlefield, put the top 2 cards of your library into your graveyard. So it has a downside, or a vague upside if you're playing Delve cards. but it's such a weak body. It's such a just a weak creature. It's a 2/1. It's going to be killed by absolutely every single thing. You know, I don't like it. I don't like it at all. I give it a D plus. You know, I think blue has aggressive creatures, and I think they're a lot better than this one. On turn 2, I'd rather play a Frostwalker over this. There's a number of things I'd rather play over this for sure. If you're Delve, you know, it gets a slight little bump for those 2 cards, but I would rather do almost any of the other mill cards in this block to get cards into my graveyard. I would rather Rakshas's Secret to get 2 cards into my graveyard than play a 2/1 for 2. So yeah, I don't like this guy. I'm not going to take him very highly. I'm not going to take him at all if possible, and it'll be included if I absolutely need a creature. Maybe if a super aggressive blue deck comes out of this, I would possibly consider playing it, but even then, probably not. So yeah, D+, don't like that guy. Next up, we have Supplant Form. Supplant Form is 4 blue instant, very expensive instant at rare. And it says return target creature to its owner's hand. That's a very expensive Force Away. Force Away is 1 and a blue. This is 4 blue. But it says more. It says put a token onto the battlefield that's a copy of that creature. This is a lot better than Force Away. There's a reason it costs 4 blue and not just 1 and a blue. I like this card, although it's very expensive. The idea of just being able to bounce their bomb and getting a copy of it is awesome. You know, if they drop one of the legendary dragons, you can bounce that dragon and get your own and start, you know, getting in with that. It's not removal, of course. It is bounce, so whatever you bounce is going to be coming back probably that next turn. And your token is slightly more fragile. Your token can be killed with Force Away and things like that. But still, this is powerful. This changes the board when you rip their creature off the board. And it significantly adds to your position when you put down that copy. So I do really like this. Yeah. If there is a solid control deck, this seems awesome because you just control until they put down a big bomb creature, and then you can get another one down. You know, you can bounce it and take it and put down your own and hopefully get through with that. Maybe you even keep back a way to remove that bomb creature when they replay it the next turn. It just seems really awesome. Not only that, but you do have the option of bouncing your own creature. And I think that's going to be one of the most fun ways to use this card. So you put down your, I was going to say Butcher of the Horde, but that doesn't make much sense in a double blue casting cost card. But let's say you put down your, I don't know, Purrlink Ancient, for example, even though you can bounce that a different way. You put down your Purrlink Ancient and you, for whatever reason, don't want to use its bounce ability, and they kill it with something. You bounce your Purrlink Ancient with Supplant Form, you get a copy of Purrlink Ancient, and next turn you replay your Purrlink Ancient that you just played. That is an insane 2-for-1. So yeah, I really like this card. I wish it was cheaper. I really wish it was cheaper, but it's so powerful that it probably couldn't be. So yeah, I'm going to give it a B+. I'm going to take this first pick when I see it. I've come up on this. I was originally a little bit more down on this just due to the cost, but thinking about the ability, it just seems huge. So I'm going to first pick this, and I'm going to probably aim to go relatively control-y, relatively late game, and hope to get some really fun 2-for-1s out of this. All right, next up we have Temporal Trespass. This is a hallmark card of this set. I believe it's on a booster pack. People were absolutely beside themselves seeing this card. It is a sorcery for 8 blue. So it's an 11-drop. You can probably guess it has Delve, and it's at Mythic. So it has Delve, of course. They don't expect you to just be casting 11 drops. So you can hopefully make this as cheap as blue, which is still hard to cast. It's still hard to reliably get 3 blue. And you also have to have 8 cards in your library or in your graveyard, so that's quite a bit. So it must be a pretty powerful effect. What does it say? Well, it says take an extra turn after this one. exile Temporal Trespass. People love extra turns. Just like Switcheroo, just like, what was it called? It was Shifting Loyalties. People love these. It really activates that sort of inner child, that cheating at the game aspect. Taking an extra turn, that's cheating. Trading creatures, trading my crappy creature for your good creature, that's cheating at the game. That's breaking the rules of the game. And people love that. People love cards that let them do that. Unfortunately, extra turns aren't that good. Extra turns have a very special place in Magic, and a very hallowed place in Magic. In Commander, of course, and in other places. But it's always in a combo. It's always in a, I take infinite extra turns. Mindslaver in Mono Blue Tron, for example. I am going to take your turn for the rest of the game. I play Narset in Commander. Taking extra turns for free is awesome. Taking extra turns and copying those extra turn cards with Chandra Firebrand, that's awesome. One single extra turn is not all that awesome, and in Limited, it's even less awesome. The majority of the time, you're going to tap out to play this card, so you're not going to do anything extra on that turn except maybe attack. And if you're confidently just attacking with your team into their board, you're probably just going to win the game anyways without this card. And then you're going to untap, and you're going to take your extra turn, you're going to draw a card, and what are you going to do? If you drew an amazing card, cool, you've got some mana to do it with, but most of the time it's going to be late game. You're probably not going to have that many cards in your hand. You may just top deck a land. It may just be a very expensive Explore. You may just play an extra land, essentially. You may just draw an extra card. So yeah, extra turns are not that good in Limited. So I am not going to look to play this card that highly. That being said, I'm going to take the card. I'm definitely going to take it because I believe it's going to hold some relatively high casual value. At the moment, it's pre-ordering for about $6. That's enough for me to rare draft in most cases. But I'm not going to look to play it. I'm going to have to be pretty hard pressed for playables to actually consider playing this card because I'd rather win my matches. I'd rather win my matches than play this. So yeah, I'm going to give this a C-. It probably should even drop into the D range. Yeah. Don't get taken in by the lure of extra turns. They're just not as good as you think they should be. All right, next up we have another mythic. Back-to-back mythics. Torrent Elemental is a creature, elemental, of course, for 4 and a blue at Mythic. It's a 3/5. So it's a 3/5 for 5, and it flies. So that's relatively okay right there. And it has a lot more text as well. Whenever Torrent Elemental attacks, tap all creatures defending player controls. So you declare Torrent Elemental as attacker, and their team turns sideways. Their blockers disappear. Every single last one of them. That's pretty good. But it has more. But wait, there's more. 3 Golgari. So 3 black-green, black-green. Black or green, black or green. Put Torrent Elemental from exile onto the battlefield tapped. Activate this ability only anytime you could cast a sorcery. So if Torrent Elemental gets exiled for whatever reason, it was, I can't think of cards offhand that exile. But if it's exiled for whatever reason, you can just return it. You can just recast it as long as you're playing black or green. So as long as you're playing Sultai or Temur. So that's pretty decent as well. But the body on this thing, the ability on this thing is just awesome. This card is huge. I'm going to put this card at A. I was going to say A+, but yeah, no, I'm going to do it. I'm going to A+ this card. I'm going to say that this card is absolutely awesome. You do have to have a board presence with this guy. You probably aren't going to win the game just attacking with this guy. But if you have anything else on the board with this guy, you're just going to be attacking in and just destroying your opponent. Your opponent can't do anything about it. In addition, your opponent has to kill this guy in order for you to not just recast him from exile. Not only that, but if you're playing Sultai, you're probably delving. You can delve this guy out of your graveyard, which puts him into exile, and then cast him after having delved him. This card just seems insane. Possibly the best card in the set for me. People are super excited about Monastery Monk or Monastery Mentor and Soulfire Grandmaster. This is the card that I think is absolutely awesome, especially for limited. Those other two cards, I don't think they're all that good in limited. This guy is going to destroy games with the slightest bit of backup. So yeah, I'm going to give him an A+. I'm going to take this first pick every single time I see it. I'm going to play it every single time I see it. Next up, we have Whisk Away. Whisk Away is an instant for 2 and a blue at common, and it says put target attacking or blocking creature on top of its owner's library. This seems pretty darn decent. This isn't just bounce. This goes all the way back to the library. It takes your opponent's turn away from it. Not only that, it's very similar to Sandblast that we talked about yesterday in that it doesn't have the attacking or blocking restriction that Killshot has, for example, which is attacking creatures only or blocking creatures only, as some other cards have. This is attacking or blocking creatures, so it hits everything that's doing something in the combat step, which is significantly better than some of those slightly more narrow cards. And those slightly more narrow cards are already relatively decent. Yeah, so I really like this card. I give it a B-. This is possibly the blue common card that I'm going to take first pick if my pack is surprisingly weak, and the blue common that I'm going to take relatively highly, just like Sandblast is. Bounce is awesome. Bouncing to the top of the library is even better. Yeah, I like this card. I'm going to take it highly. I'm never going to cut it in any blue deck I play. It's going to go in every single one. So B- for sure. Obviously not a bomb because it's just an instant. It doesn't affect the board. It doesn't win games, but it's so useful. Just absolutely fantastic. All right, next up we have Will of the Naga. Will of the Naga is an instant for 4 blue at common, and it has Delve, so hopefully it's going to be cheaper than 4 blue. And it says tap up to 2 target creatures. Those creatures don't on-tap during their controller's next on-tap step. So it's double Crippling Chill. There's other cards with this name. I just can't remember them right offhand now. You know, Crippling Chill has gone down for me. Crippling Chill I thought was going to be awesome, and I think it's the lack of really true aggression in blue that Crippling Chill has gone down for me. With the addition of these aggressive blue creatures that I've been talking about, maybe Crippling Chill will get better, in which case maybe this will get a little bit better. That being said, it's of this sort of cycle of cards that we know and love costing a heck of a lot more because they have Delve. So, you know, we've had Set Adrift. We've had, what was the other one? I can't even remember, to be honest. There was another Delve that I just recently talked about, Rite of Undoing, which is the expensive Delve version of Peel from Reality. And this could fall into that same trap. This could fall into that trap of being a card that we know and love, but because of the variance of Delve, it just doesn't quite end up being all that awesome. So I'm kind of hesitant on this. I give it a C. It seems fine, but I'm probably going to look to cut it, and I am rating it a little bit lower just because of my experiences with Set Adrift and my slow lessening of evaluation on Crippling Chill. So yeah, I'm going to give this a C. I'll have to see how it plays. It could go up slightly, it could go down slightly. All right, we have one last card, Right Into Being. Right Into Being is a sorcery for 2 and a blue at common. And it says, look at the top 2 cards of your library. Manifest one of those cards, then put the other one on top or bottom of your library. So this kind of sidesteps the caution that I have about Manifest, the concern that I have about Manifest. I actually get to know what my Manifest card is going to be before I manifest it. I only get 2 choices. So, you know, they could both be bad choices, but I can take the worst choice. You know, I can take the land over the spell. I can take the awesome creature that I want to surprise somebody with, you know, somewhere down the road, instead of the whatever else I happen to see. So I actually do like that. I do like that this slightly nullifies the variance involved in manifesting. And as well, you do get to put the card on top or bottom of your library. So there's scry built into this. By the way, scry and manifest would have been incredible together. It'll be interesting to see if anything happens with that in constructed. But yeah, I really like this card. I like this card so much more than Soul Summons. Soul Summons is cheaper, but I like the scry built into this, plus choosing which card I get to manifest. I like this a fair bit more. I give it a B minus. I've talked about how I'm pretty hesitant about manifest only cards that either only manifest or do something really minimal plus manifest, just like I don't like bolster only cards. But this one I really like. It gets around the variance. It lets me scry powerful things. So I give this a B minus. I'll take this relatively highly. And if manifest does end up being really, really good, I could even put this up a little bit higher. If manifest happens to be as bad as I think it is, this might go a little bit lower. But still, the fact that I get even the slightest of choices, plus get to set up my next draw, are awesome. So I give that a B minus for sure. So that wraps it up for the blue set review. Blue looks interesting. It looks like there could be some aggressive creatures in here. It looks like blue could kind of get back into the aggression game slightly. It doesn't always live there, but there is often something, and I found it a little bit lacking in con, so I'm excited to try that out. There's a lot of cards that'll be interesting. I'm interested in trying Jeskai Infiltrator. I'm interested in trying Meringue River Prowler. It'll remain to see how they actually work out. And I'm super excited to open a Torrent Elemental in a draft and just go to town with that. I'm so excited about that card, I can't even say. So yeah, that's about it for blue. Hopefully you enjoyed the blue set review. This is day 2. We've got 4 more days to go. We'll have black tomorrow. We'll have red on Wednesday, green on Thursday, and then gold, artifacts, colorless, land, and closing arguments, etc. on Friday. So stay tuned for those episodes. As always, if you have any comments, suggestions, questions, discussion about these cards, etc., let me know in the comments below. You can also find me on Twitter at the Mana Leek. That's L-E-E-K, like the vegetable, not the card. You can also find me on Facebook at facebook.com/themanaleek. You've found me here on YouTube already. As always, you can like the video by clicking that little thumbs up icon, and you can subscribe to my channel by clicking subscribe. That will keep you up to date on all the latest videos. That will let you know as soon as the next set review videos come out. That will let you know as soon as we're back to our regular Wacky Wednesday, Saturday, or Spiky Saturday schedule. And it also, of course, lets me reach more viewers. So definitely do all that. And as always, if you have any questions, comments, suggestions, etc., let me know. Otherwise, I will see you all tomorrow for the black set review.